Now the question then, Mr. Mukundun, is the impact this 1 lakh crore rupees, which the finance minister says is direct taxes that she's letting go of, will have on consumer-facing sectors and the economy, and the kind of multiplier that these consumers, when they go out and spend, the kind of multiplier this has on economic growth. So what's your reading of the money that's been left on the table by the government for consumers to go out and spend?
So Rahul, I think firstly, let me address the whole issue which we started the discussion with. Was there a pain in middle class? Has it been addressed? It's been addressed. Now it puts money in the hands of the people. But the second big issue is that we also have addressed the issue of jobs. For example, there's a focus on agriculture, focus on MSME. I'm going to come to your point. And thirdly, they've also identified they don't want to let go of the fiscal glide path. So 4.4 they've addressed. What they are now saying is, as far as infrastructure is concerned, it's not infrastructure the way we saw before, but there are many layers to the infrastructure which we need to unpeel. One is the gap in infrastructure. They're saying 3-year project pipeline or public-private partnership. They've asked for that. And that is something which will absolutely fill the gap, which we are saying that there's a slowdown in spending or whatever. It is not a slowdown. It's like inviting the private sector to come in. If private sector is to come in PPI mode, then there must be trust. If you look at this budget, the first time, 10 times the word trust was used. And there was a very clear focus on making sure there's ease of doing business and cost of doing business, and also decriminalization laws, which will bring the private sector also to play a role in infrastructure. So I would disagree with what Vinayak has been saying. This budget is shifting from government-only mode to say we are in partnership with everyone in India, a Team India partnership. But let me add a point on what we should count more as infrastructure. For example, the commitment of 20,000 crores to 5 nuclear power plants and committing to getting to 100 gigawatts of nuclear power is a game changer. If you want a base load power sector, if it has to go more and more in solar, it needs more base load. And you don't want to put coal-fired base load, you need to go nuclear.
But that's also responding to Donald Trump and the fact that Prime Minister Modi will be going to America in a couple of weeks
from now.
So
let me finish my whole thesis, okay? You're going into nuclear that is the only deal to be done. But if you look at what has been said in terms of civil aviation, there's a whole process which she has said is that she's going to work with customs, she's going to work with civil aviation ministry to make sure ease of moving the goods out of airports. Today, the biggest bottleneck in electronic shipments outside is not electronic production. We can get it done. But if we don't get more airlines to cargo planes to come and take off from those airports, we have built the airports. But how do you increase the capacity? The goods cannot be sitting 35 hours in an airport. It has to move in 3 hours. And Chennai airport has done it. So now they are following the whole pathway of increasing, and she has spoken about it. Then there's an emphasis on shipbuilding and ports. Why? You want to export more. You want to get your goods across and plug into global value chain. What are our partners telling? We can make here. We are happy about it. But how do we get our goods to market more competitively? So we need more competitive ports, we need more ships, we need more shipbuilding, lesser turnaround time. So the whole focus is on saying that, listen, can we get the last mile addressed? So when I say infrastructure is not just about building buildings, but also making sure they're effectively used, efficiently used, and in a way that it sort of promotes the outcomes which we want to do. Now coming back to your point about I think there are 3-4 areas where I think India is in need of technology. Let's be very clear about it. We are building Bharat small reactor. 5 of them are being put out for a bid, and the bid many companies are participating, including many companies from our group. So there is going to be an effort to get into nuclear power. But there are also reactors which are micro reactors, for which the technology is lying with US. We must access the technology. For example, if you get micro reactors, you can make each village, each city power independent. That doesn't need big size. You put in a 40-foot container to give nuclear power. These are technological advances towards sustainability where US has an edge. Secondly, I think the other big thing which we need to also focus with US is about how do we diversify our defense equipment. For example, we've invested from Tata Group into defense, for example, building the cargo carrier where private sector has come in. But really, I think, again, partnership with Europe, partnership with US is extremely critical in that space to move away from single source of our defense. I'm not by any chance saying there's an issue related to the previous source of defense equipment to the newer one, but the new technology really does address getting access to drone technology. How are we going to get lastly, if you want to also prepare talent to cope with it, how do you do it? Now the focus is on saying, listen, I'm going to give broadband to each village. District level school. Now, imagine each district level school now has access to broadband, and these kids the kids in 5th and 6th class get access to the latest pedagogy, latest things which are happening around the world. They've got Atal Tinkering Lab to become more creative. You have a situation in 10 years' time when these people will be ready for workforce. We'll have a skilled workforce which is creative, willing to adopt AI, not getting afraid of AI, saying that AI is a game changer for us to participate in the world market. So that's the positive.
Let me get Vinayak Chatterjee to respond before I go across to Dr. Rehan. The argument that Mukundan makes is that look at infrastructure more broadly. It's not just physical infrastructure in the form of more roads, more highways, more bridges. It's the whole spectrum of infrastructure spends, and the budget is doing enough to address it, even if the allocations to just physical infrastructure haven't necessarily gone up.
On a lighter note, this is the first budget in 30 years of participating with CII in these post-budget discussions that I've not heard 3 words mentioned in the budget. Road, highways, railways, and infrastructure allocation. These 3 words are absent in the budget speech, by the way. This is just a little lighter comment. See, I am not denying that every budget has a slew of interventions on infrastructure. BharatNet was announced broadband 10 years ago. Kusum solar pumps was announced some other budget. Every budget sees 10, 20 initiatives for the infrastructure sector. So this is, I mean, the fact that another new list has come up to say, okay, this time it's nuclear power, solar, small module reactors. It is schools connectivity. It's fine. I appreciate that because the economy needs interventions this time. But that does not derail the debate to say, are these interventions enough to pump prime the economy to go to 8% GDP? Do you have an alternative model other than infrastructure pump priming the economy? And is the alternative model that all of you are supporting here, I'm in a debate mode as you can see, saying that increasing middle class disposable income, ease of doing business, are you all convinced that all of these together are going to give you 2%
no, but
increase
can I challenge
GDP?
you to say that had we reached a point where the law of diminishing returns had set in, that you were throwing in more money towards physical infrastructure spends, but wasn't necessarily having the extra multiply. I mean, after a while, it kind of plateaued out, and therefore that wasn't the only approach. If it was, then when you increase allocation in public infra by 30%, it should have that kind of multiply, and it didn't.
So the question is it law of diminishing returns or is it the law of diminishing votes? The one argument that I've heard is that building major highways, etc., is not getting the quantum of votes that you thought it would. So what are we talking about? Diminishing political returns or diminishing economic returns? I leave that question for you and other commentators to answer.
Vinayak Chatterjee is on fire this afternoon. I mean, that much is clear. Okay, and everybody else is wondering, okay, our guy is now kind of out of control. But that's fine. It's good to have this public conversation. It's good to have this debate because, frankly, very often if everybody is restrained in what they say and saying something else off camera and something completely different on camera, then it's no fun. This is far more productive and far more useful. So, Dr. Trehan, we saw a reduction in basic customs duty on some cancer drugs coming in. Far more importantly, we're hearing Donald Trump in that conversation he had with Prime Minister Modi talking about additional tariffs against the Indian pharma sector, which he thinks is taking American consumers and American companies for a ride. So as somebody who's looking at this very carefully, how are you reacting to the cues that you're seeing play out?
So, you know, there are 2 aspects to it. Donald Trump is another story, no matter which way you look at it. So hopefully it'll never come to pass. Coming back to India, today's budget, this is working backwards from 47, the Viksit Bharat announcement that has been made, that where we are going to be. We know that we need to double our healthcare sector in the next 5 to 10 years. That means another 1.5 million beds to be added on because we are way below the average required to keep a healthy India. So towards that announcement of 10,000 new medical seats for this year is always welcome. Second, the focus was on employment basically. And the addition of 5 centers of skill excellence is also welcome because that will also help us to actually train the paramedics which are required to build this whole structure that is required to have a healthy India. Then, more importantly, in the skilling sector, the 500 crores committed to the AI Center of Excellence will be very significant because if you look at it, what the rest of the world is doing, it's way ahead of us in stimulating at the school level. And I think this will go a long way. In medicine, we use a lot of AI already, but this is a runway which we have to cover in very short steps in the next 5 years. Now, then comes the inclusion of the gig workers into the PMJY. Now, they were out of the loop. They had no coverage. There's no social security. This is a very welcome move. When you come to cancer, there is a huge relief for cancer patients in two forms. One is the fact that the duty was not reduced, it was eliminated. It has become duty exempt. That will give a big relief financially to the cancer victims. Second, the introduction of cancer daycare centers, which are supposed to be in every district, but this year it's supposed to be 200 to be implemented this year. The fact remains that these people who are actually going for their treatment, sometimes even on a weekly basis to get their chemotherapy injections, have to travel a long way, great expense, in pain. I think that's a big relief, big humanitarian step forward. So overall, we are happy with what has been done for the healthcare sector, because these are things that are current, need immediate attention, because cancer is going rampant, not only in India, around the world. And we needed to take these steps. So overall, I would say we are positive, but no big bang announcements.